Welcome to Manga's Seal YouTube channel. The previous video link is on the description box or on the top right card. Volume 15, The Half-Elf Godkin. Inside the green secret house, Ainz was working together with Mare. First, they lined up the food on top of an obsidian desk that was produced using magic. There was also warm soup, but it was put inside something to keep it warm, and they planned to serve it right before they ate. They prepared glasses, full of ice for 3, and placed a bottle full of juice in the center of the desk. Even with the door of the green secret house closed, it was still perfectly ventilated. It was made so that through the work of a magical mechanism, neither sounds nor smells could leak out from the inside. However, because the protection of that magic wouldn't work when the door was opened, even though the two of them had shut themselves in here, it meant that when Aura came back, the smell of the food would leak outside. Smells could be carried for a surprisingly long distance. Aura, of all people, probably wouldn't commit some blunder like returning to base without confirming the surrounding area was safe, but he couldn't rule out the possibility that a scent flying outside of Aura's sensory range wouldn't be noticed by someone else. In this forest, if someone with intelligence and culture caught the scent of some delicious food, they would surely find it suspicious. The dark elves themselves didn't possess a sense of smell on par with beasts. However, in this world, it became possible depending on the class build. Even if the person themselves couldn't do it, if they were using a magical beast and could communicate with it wordlessly, it would amount to the same thing. In other words, this meant that Ainz and Mare were diligently working away at something that would make Aura's work wasted. Ainz was also fully aware of this. So, the reason the two of them were cheerfully preparing for a meal was because, even with Ainz forcing his empty skull to work at full capacity, this was the only idea he could come up with to escape his feelings of guilt in the end. Namely, it was to greet Aura with a delicious meal when she came home tired from work. Of course, he might be getting his priorities backward by showing his appreciation with an act that would put all of Aura's perseverance to waste. That was why Ainz thought about it the other way around. Yes, they just didn't have to be found out by another person. The problem was the smell being spread around the area, and that someone else might be lured in, enticed by it. If that was the case, he just had to make it so the smell didn't spread. The most foolproof way was to have the table set, shut the door when Aura came inside, and serve the food. But that lacked impact. That was why, when the door opened, it would be ta-da, there's the food. That feeling of surprise itself had the biggest meaning and significance. So, he had returned to Nazarick and had the head chef prepare dishes with as weak a smell as possible. On top of that, the wind elemental that Mare summoned with a magic item sent the air around them up into the sky. All the air, including the smells, would be sent up to the tops of the trees, where it would finally start to spread. Scent particles were heavier than air. He didn't know whether it was the same in this world. For some reason, they might not come back down, and even if they did, by the time they reached the ground they would have become considerably diluted. But, because when the updraft is created the leaves will sway slightly, not to an extent that Ainz would worry about, but if some sharp-eyed person were watching from the sky, they might feel like something was out of place. However, a few days ago, when Ainz was doing high-altitude reconnaissance, ordinary birds were about the only things that were flying in the sky, so it was probably fine not to worry. Ainz-sama. It's about time I returned this to you. Around the time the preparations were finished, what Mare held out was the orb Ainz had given him a short while ago. It was a top-quality magic item he had named Elemental Gacha. Inside the transparent glass-like sphere were 4 lights moving around in circles. 4 times a day you could summon and use an elemental for 1 hour. The types of elemental that could be summoned were fire, water, wind, and earth. There were also the composite elementals of fire plus earth equals magma, water plus wind equals blizzard, earth plus water equals bog, fire plus water equals hydrothermal, earth plus wind equals sandstorm, fire plus wind equals firenado, and more. Among these, the elementals of fire, water, wind, and earth could manifest as high-ranking elementals, with levels in the low 40s, mid-rank elementals with levels in the mid-20s, and as lower-rank elementals with levels in the single digits. On these occasions, a single high-ranking elemental was summoned. The number of mid-rank elementals was random, but between 1 and 3 were summoned. The number of lower-rank elementals summoned was also random, but a minimum of 3 to a maximum of 6 were summoned. In regards to the composite elementals, they could manifest as high-ranking elementals with levels in the mid-50s, mid-rank elementals with levels in the low 30s, and as lower-rank elementals with levels in the low 10s. However, the number of composite elementals summoned in all cases was 1. Just from hearing this, you might think it sounded pretty useful, but unfortunately the elemental summoned was chosen randomly. Moreover, Compared to the lower rank elementals, getting a high-ranking elemental to appear was difficult. When it came to the higher-ranking elementals, it was on the same level as winning a shooting star ring. It was far too strategically useless to not be able to summon something that suited the opponent or situation. If you summoned an earth elemental when flying in the sky, all you could do was watch it drop like a rock. In fact, they had to use the item 3 times until Mare could summon a wind elemental. No, there's no need for that. I'm giving it to you, Mare. As you are aware, the item is a little iffy, so I'd be happy if you would hold on to it for me if you don't mind. Although it would be a little different if it could summon, say, the highest ranking elementals, defiled elementals, or holy elementals. Furthermore, it was originally restricted so that only druids could use it. If Mare doesn't have it, then its only role as an item would be decorating the treasure hole. It might be useful while your levels were low, but when it came to Ainz and Mare, it was an item that couldn't even be used as a shield. For that reason, he had originally placed it in his inventory, thinking he would give it to someone whose levels were low. Hey, are you sure that's okay? Yeah, I don't mind. Rather than leaving it collecting dust in the treasure hole. Mare using it would be 100 times more valuable. Thank you very much. So are the elementals summoned by this, considered the same as having been summoned using magic of that element? I also have an item that can summon elementals, but for those you have to cast a spell with the corresponding element, or that has it as a secondary element, before activating it. In other words, if Mare wanted to summon a flame elemental using an item, he had to use magic that had flame as a secondary element, for example. Although Mare couldn't cast it fireball before using it. I believe the prerequisites have probably been met, but why don't we test it out once, the next time we have time to do it? Yes. Please let me do it. In the past, this was before he trusted them completely. He had investigated the abilities of all the NPCs, and in doing so he had also learned about their equipment. The item that could summon elementals that Mare mentioned could certainly summon a single high-level elemental, but could only do so once every 24 hours, and the summoning duration wasn't even 10 minutes. If you were being honest, the value of the item itself was low. There were plenty of other, much more powerful items. And yet, the reason Mare hadn't switched out that piece of equipment was because Bikubiku Chigama had given it to him. Ainz knew that this sentiment was shared among all NPCs. In spite of there being far better items, the NPCs would not change their own items. If they were to change them, it would just be for another piece of equipment that they had been given at the beginning. Of course, if Ainz gave it to them, like he did just now, they would use the item, but they had never submitted a request wanting to switch out their gear of their own accord. The only time might have been when they were having combat drills, and Albedo came, pleading that she wanted to borrow various things. They were all being bound. That was an extremely rude way of putting it, but those were the words that flashed through his mind. That went for himself, too. Is something wrong? Ainz was pulled back to reality by the worried-looking Mare's expression. It seems he had been thinking about meaningless things. Oh, no, nothing, that's right, it's nothing at all. I was just thinking about how if I were Mare, how I should use this item, that's all. Sure enough. Summoning an elemental in advance is about all it's. The Cerberus on the other side of the door moved. When Ainz opened the door, Cerberus let out a growl. The three heads were pointed in a certain direction. There could be no doubt that this meant someone's coming. Ainz and Mare looked at one another. Cerberus hadn't met Aura and Fenrir. Even so, it had noticed their sense that clung to Ainz and Mare, so I shouldn't react like this. The two of them looked in the direction Cerberus was glaring together. There didn't appear to be anything hiding in the trees. Mare cupped a hand behind his ears, trying to hear any sounds coming from that direction. It definitely seems like something is heading this way. In other words, it's not them, is it? When Aura and Fenrir departed, they had gone making narious sound. I'm sorry. I can't tell that much. But you're right. As Ainz Sama says, I think if it were my sister she would be coming much more quietly. But I don't think there's any chance that she would make noise on purpose, just to let us know that she searched the area, and that she knows there's no problem, and that she's heading back. In other words, he didn't know. Then I guess it can't be helped. I'll be going as we originally planned. Ainz activated Perfect Unknowable, and gave a command for Cerberus to accompany him. Unlike when it was necessary for him to give verbal commands, mental commands wouldn't be interfered with by Perfect Unknowable. However, because even Cerberus couldn't see Ainz, their positioning was important. If they handled it poorly, it was possible he would be sent flying by Cerberus. Perfect Unknowable really does come in handy. It's a shame that Pandora's actor, who can transform into me, is the only one who can use it. Well, there are others who could do it if I allowed them to use scrolls, but there are things like materials, time, limits, and all sorts of other problems with that. While mumbling and grumbling in his head, Ainz walked following Cerberus's lead. Before long, even Ainz's ears could hear the sound of grass being trampled, and he saw an enormous shadow. The bear? However, this was different from your average bear. It seemed to have 6 legs, and looked like his fur was soaking wet and clinging to his body. Maybe it was some sort of magical beast with the special ability to shoot out water. But what caught Ainz's eye more than that was Or sitting on its back. She was holding a whip in her hand, and caused the bear-type magical beast to tremble in fear when she cracked it at a regular interval. On the side was Fenrir accompanying them. Or didn't have that sort of magical beast under her command, right? What the hell is going on? No, he could just ask her about it. It seems they had noticed the Cerberus and were warily looking this way. But the reason they didn't immediately move to attack was probably because they couldn't confirm whether it was a wild Cerberus or Cerberus that Ainz had summoned. They seemed to be saying that, if it were Ainz's servant, it should somehow have that feeling to it, or would it be different for a summoned monster? Ainz cancel perfect unknowable. Ainz Sama. In an instant Or, the look of caution disappearing from her face, shouted in joy. Hey, giddy up. Or swung her whip at the bear that seemed rather reluctant to come this way. Letting out a scream that could only be thought of as animal abuse, the bear woke to Ainz, terrified. When Or arrived in front of Ainz, she dismounted the bear. Welcome back, Or. I'm back, Ainz Sama. I'm sure you have some questions, so let me answer them first. This bear-type magical beast seemed to be the boss of this area, so I placed it under my control. I used a whip to drill it into him that I'm the boss. Why did I even do such a thing? How could I tell that to Ainz Sama, right? Ainz wondered what the hell that was. To tell you the truth, I don't know just how powerful that magical beast is, but is it strong enough that the dark elves and other animals are wary of it? Oh, that's right. When you're as strong as Ainz Sama, you can't tell how strong this small fry is. Let me see, it certainly isn't that strong, but it seems to have more than enough strength to control this area as its territory. So, if it were your ordinary, average dark elf, I think they wouldn't get close because it would be dangerous. Actually, it appears nobody approaches this entire area out of fear of this guy. Therefore, I recommend making this our temporary camping area, on the point that an intruder will hardly ever appear. That's wonderful. I see, Ainz thought. There certainly was a bigger merit in placing it under their control, rather than just killing it. Because it was unclear how much time they were going to spend searching for and observing the Dark Elves with this as their base. If that was the case, then if they killed the Lord of the territory, the surrounding area would be in an uproar, and the Dark Elves were likely to come here to gather information. So it would be better to let it live, in the sense that they could also avoid that kind of encounter. Be that as it may. Or, it's not as if I'm questioning your judgment, but aren't you already controlling magical beasts to the limits of your ability? There haven't been any magical beasts within Nazarick that have been released from your control due to this one being placed under your control, have there? In most cases it was customary for them to be freed in order from oldest to newest, not when one was to choose and release magical beasts, but when they were forced to be released. It was even the same for summoned and created monsters. In Yggdrasil, there were few examples of a warning message popping up and being able to select which one to release yourself. Everything's a-okay. Beast tamers have connections to the magical beasts placed under their control, but I don't have a connection with this one. In other words, that means I haven't placed them under my complete control. I just simply drilled it into him that I'm the stronger one. So I'm not using the beast tamer ability to raise its abilities either. I see, if that's the case then we can't say it's completely safe, can we? That meant it was possible for its wild instincts to awaken and suddenly attack them. Having said that, he couldn't imagine Aura overlooking that possibility. She had probably judged that the people here wouldn't suffer the slightest injury from it. However, they had to confirm it, just in case. Ainz, wondering what level it was around, suddenly remembered his pet. By the way, which is stronger, Hamsuk or this one? Aura had an apologetic look on her face. No, even if you didn't look so distressed. Can't you clearly tell just by looking that the bear-type magical beast is stronger? May I be allowed to answer you honestly? Of course. I, the master of Hamsuk, have no reservations at all. Let me hear your unbiased opinion. In that case, speaking in terms of pure physical abilities, it's stronger than the old Hamsuk. But Hamsuk can use magic, so if you consider that much, it's difficult to predict which one would win in the event they fought. Because if magic is effective, the course of the battle will be decided instantly. On top of that, the current Hamsuk even has the warrior class. If it's in an armored state, I think Hamsuk would win without question. The image of the Hamsuk that just lazed around sleeping appeared in Ainz's mind. And for some reason, there was a death knight next to him. He became slightly irritated. Certainly, Hamsuk was classified as a pet, so Ainz didn't mind that he lays about. You could also say he was working just by walking around with Momin. On top of that, Ainz also knew that he was working hard to acquire the warrior class and other skills. And yet, it made him angry whenever he saw someone goofing off next to someone who was working hard. You don't have to go so far to stand up for Hamsuk, or... But he swallowed those words. It was out of consideration for Aura's feelings. She would never praise Hamsuk. I see. Could he say anything more than I see? Ainz, who didn't want to say anything like Hamsuk's pretty amazing too, was at a loss, so he decided to ignore it and move on. So did a magical beast that strong just happen to be here? Or is it that magical beasts like this are common in the Sea of Trees? It's something I'd like to investigate thoroughly. We haven't spotted any high-level magical beasts on our route so far, have we? Yes. There may have been some that were just passing through, but I didn't see any. Perhaps if we searched, we might be able to find some, but what are we going to do? No, we won't bother with that. It's not as if we came here to find this sort of magical beast. Understood, Ainz-sama. But there's something about exploring that is a little attractive. Magical beasts like this bear haven't been found even in the great forest of Taub. Therefore, there's a high probability that plants and animals, the native medicinal plants, and things that are unique to this place optimized for this environment are living here. On top of that, there may be places where some kind of special phenomenon is occurring. In this world that had magic, places where special phenomena existed. Water that flowed from bottom to top, a hill where a pillar of rainbow-colored light stood on the days it hailed, a desert where an enormous tornado occurred. Once every few decades, it seemed that these sorts of peculiar sights could be seen. That's right, unfortunately. There still weren't any of those mysterious areas within the territories swallowed up by the Sorcerer Kingdom. In Yggdrasil, these sorts of places had unique effects, and rare materials, and monsters could be found there. Would that rule also apply to this world? Let's take the pillar of prismatic light that dropped a rainbow stone, as if that light had solidified after it vanished, for example. This was famous as an item that aided in the creation of magic items. Wouldn't it be related to the strengthening of Nazaruk, if that kind of special region could be brought under the Sorcerer Kingdom's control? It doesn't seem likely that the elves have a thorough knowledge of the great Sea of Trees. If that's the case, then it's just as you said, or... In the future our objective will be exploring this place, that's right. It may be necessary to send out adventurers. The undead that Ainz produced were unable to do things like discovering new species of medicinal plants. Maybe it was time for an adventuring party with an undead team of luggage bears added on to take the stage after all. Now then, let's head back. Mare is waiting for us. Okay. Even so, Ainz-sama. This is just to confirm, but is that Cerberus something that Ainz-sama has summoned? Yes, of course, you're exactly right. It's the monster I summoned to substitute for Fenrir. Ainz walked along with Aura.